G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now today, as always, we have a lot to go over. We need to look at the maps, we need to look at a number of different maps and footage confirming where the front line is moving. We have a lot of updates there and a lot of red check being shown on the map today, but I want to go over some physics as well. Of course, we saw Russia use as a world first the IRBM or ICBM. Realistically, it doesn't matter either way, but I want to look at, well, there was no explosion on that per se, but we do know that it came through so quickly. What was just the kinetic impact of this? As it is still relevant, and I can't find the original source, but many Russian pages are reporting today that the Russian Ministry of Defense has ordered the airspace over these launch sites to be closed until November the 30th. So it's worth looking at that. And further on that use of that system, if you're watching videos like this, then you're probably in the 1 or 2% of interest in the topic of Ukraine-Russian war. Way more than just the regular person. And this is something that we and I need to take into account more, is we are, combing through little bits of information. Most people see the news once a week and see something like this. So what I've been interested in is what are regular people who are just going about the day, what are they saying about this? How do they see the use of this IRBM? What's the regular Joe saying? So I'm going to share that with you and some conversations that I've been having as well. I need to talk about the ruble. I want to talk about a new Ukrainian weapon system that we've seen for the very first time through a Russian drone. So where I want to start though is with something that I don't think I've ever had as much request to talk about a topic as this. Right. This was Reuters reporting. Russia condemns irresponsible talk of nuclear weapons for Ukraine. Absolutely irresponsible, says Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. New York Times reported last week that some unidentified Western officials have suggested US President Joe Biden could give Ukraine nuclear weapons before he leaves office. This is not going to happen. Let's talk about this. Several officials have suggested Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. Right. So all the weapons that Ukraine had that relinquished part of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, these were returned to Russia. So I'm sure if Biden asks really nicely, Putin may make Ukraine a nuclear-armed power again. And in the process, Mr. Biden should also ask Putin if he can get then back the 6 Tu-160 long-range strategic bombers for Ukraine. So let alone that US has no weapons that were ever stationed in Ukraine, what I will say about nuclear weapons is, one, nuclear non-proliferation treaty prohibits this, but the US at this point won't supply Tomahawk, the Germans won't supply Taurus, Putin's probably not going to supply nukes to Ukraine, but nor is any other country at this point in time. Is a nuclear-armed future on the cards for Ukraine? Look, personally, I don't think so, but I would completely understand if Ukrainian officials didn't get those guarantees of NATO going, well, we have to look at something to secure then our country. I've said the exact same about Australia, small country, but with someone who could, much larger military, not on our borders, but in our region of the world. I've said if I was the leader of Australia, that is something that I would be looking down. Now, I did say we had no confirmation on the ATACMS strikes on that airfield. We still don't really know what has happened, although it's one of the first times I've actually seen the Russian MOD talk about, openly, the loss of that S-400 system. But I want to go over what Fighter Bomber has said here. Now, this photo, people are saying, Russia's given away the location here of an air defense system. That is, in my opinion, incorrect, showing this Panzer. No. This photo was done on purpose. The reason this photo was taken like this, in my opinion, is to show that there's still an active air defense system there, that it hasn't been destroyed. Published a photo of the ATACMS missile debris from the Kinetic airport. It's anything but that, but don't mind. They're saying that they don't actually call it this and show the Panzer. Now, people are saying, is this a stuff up? No. This photo, in my opinion, is a form of propaganda and is done to show your systems have been here. Yes, you took out this. We took out some of yours, but this is still there. Fighter bomber says, as I said, there were no aircraft at the airfield. They could have hit the airfield and emptied Gazprom barrels there, but having estimated that they estimated targets they wanted to reach for the crests of the Ukrainians based on donuts and cassettes, and this very Panzer position was one of those targets. So trying to hit this, but the photo showing that they didn't. The most valuable equipment in the airfield, tactical air defense is to be hit. 2 raids, difference of 5 minutes, send greetings. So we know the S-400, he's saying that nothing was there to any significance. Again, wait on satellite imagery. I'm surprised though that we haven't got satellite imagery yet. So one thing I'll say is that probably points to that there wasn't a heap of planes or choppers taken out there. But again, wait for photographic evidence. Now, overnight, Russia has launched the largest drone strike against Ukraine throughout the war at a number of 188. Now, they say here 76 were shot down, 95 by EW, so 171 down is what Ukraine is claiming here. But what we need to look at too is Russia starting using more drones, but without warheads, like cheaper drones, to basically fly through and try and triangulate where the air defense systems are for then their ballistic missile, cruise missiles to take out some of those systems as well. But we can see the sanctions put on some of these components for these drones are not working. Russia is increasing the size of these attacks and how often these attacks take place. Now, before we get dorky and look at the physics behind, actually, no, sorry, let's talk about this first, then we'll look at the maps and then the Oreshnik. Now, this is the location first. So this is Odessa. So right around here, of course, this is just the corner, the western corner of Crimea here. So along here, it's said that a new Ukraine HRIM-2 has been destroyed. Now, I don't have the knowledge to be able to say, yes, that is that, but I thought I would show you this. Again, this is acclaimed. Any losses in this, whether it is this, whether it is taking down 171 drones, whether it is anything, I don't care if it has a red, blue, and white flag or a yellow and blue flag. I don't care. Take it with a grain of salt because the information war here is massive as well. So said that it has taken out that HRIM. Now, this was posted here along with the video on the other side, or the wrong side, I believe it was. The wrong side. This has never happened before, but it will. The objective control footage contains the first documentary confirmation history of the destruction of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Grom-2 OTRK by the Iskander-M. Now, one thing, the Iskander-Ms have been absolutely wreaking havoc with the new ways they are being used as the policy shifts away from missile battalions to artillery battalions. The use case of drones, that's a point we need to speak about in this too, and how many of them Russia can use. It seems like they've got an endless supply of Iskander-Ms. But irregardless of if this was this system or not, one, if it is, that is a massive hit. But if it's not, there's still a drone operating way out over in this direction. So at absolute minimum, well, this is going to be very rough, but let's go from here to here, at least 120 kilometers behind the front line, guiding a missile in. Now, what exactly is this system? These are all from basically 2022. It's named a few different things, but it's an operational tactical missile system. It's a Ukrainian short-range ballistic missile. As other articles have said, Ukraine is about to get a missile that could kill Putin, points out Telegraph here, manpower issues too. First time since the full-scale war 2022, Zelensky has said the Ukrainian army has successfully tested its own ballistic missile. This was in August, saying, I thought it was too early to talk about, but there has already been a test, positive, of the Ukrainian ballistic missile. I congratulate our military-industrial complex on this. So, again, there are claims that this has been used before. We have no concrete evidence of that. And again, this is the first time I've seen any even claims of taking out that specific system. Now, before we look at the Oreshnik, what the regular people are saying, and what the damage from that kinetic energy transfer from going thousands of kilometers just into the earth would actually do, let's have a quick look at the maps. Now, Sersky has said this, reported by Noel Reports. We must stop the enemy, but victory is impossible if Ukrainian forces remain purely defensive. We must seize the initiative and counterattack, and we will. Now, this is what I have been basically saying. I've been saying that victory is impossible if Ukraine stay on the defensive. If the goal of victory isn't just survival, if the goal is the return of the occupied areas, the Russian command being held responsible, and everything basically in the 10-point peace plan, then Ukraine can't do this defensively. And it doesn't look like, we're going to look at the ruble later, but it doesn't look like Russia is on the verge of collapse. It doesn't seem like any more. It seems actually further away than it did in 2022. And the amount of messaging of that actually seems to be not there anymore. Remember back in 2022, these sanctions will collapse in a month, in a week, in this, that, 23, 24, 25. That's all the things we're hearing. But what I've said is either way, we have to see Ukraine go on the offensive at some point. It's going to mean massive mobilization. It's going to mean then massive amounts of training and weapons as well. And of course, Sersky replaced Zaluzny. Zaluzny still is incredibly popular. People have said he's far more likely, if he ran for president of Ukraine, to become the president than Zelensky would be for another term. Zaluzny, and I'll preach this as much as I can, he was 100% right for what ended up getting him sacked when he said we need 500,000 guys. So must seize the initiative and counterattack. Ukraine at the moment is still withdrawing. They don't have the manpower, weapons, initiative anywhere to stop the Russian offensive, including Kursk. It needs to not only stop, but then swing back. And remember, Ukraine is going rearwards at the moment, which has all the benefits of fortifications, of you can have less men, you've got better logistics, all of this because it's in that territory, than the other way. Ukraine's struggling to stop the Russian advance. And remember, you can't just stop, you need to come to a stop and then go back. It's going to be very, very difficult. Now, let's just go onto the map here. Of course, red areas occupied since 22, purple since 2014. Now, you can see as soon as we're even zoomed out, there's a lot of red check being shown on this map today. Now, quickly, let's just come up into here. Now, for the third day in a row, we see that Russia has made ground across then the Oskil up in the far northeast. We haven't seen this move. I'm still not really sure on this, and I think there's going to be a huge problem for Russian logistics across here for them. But again, it's interesting to see 3 days in a row ground being made. One thing I have said though is this area here gives a lot of high ground that could be used for artillery or mortars, but again, I'm not really sure what exactly is happening in here. But again, wait and see, and we will find out. But interested to see that for a third day in a row. But let's come down onto the more burning areas. Firstly, let's look at Kharkiv. Now you can see in Kharkiv itself, there is more fighting, and around in Ballistic as well, although we do figure there is far more control in here. Remember, we saw Russian forces all the way out to here only yesterday in the geolocations as well. Now, let's have a look at this. And we'll just come out because we have two map updates for this, but we will go over, of course, both of them. So sorry, I don't know which one is opening right here. So on the northern side around this Beretsky, we can see just above this that Syriac is showing more control by the Russian forces. We can see there has been some change in here, so we know in this direction there's definitely been some amount of advancement. Now we'll move down into Kharkiv itself. Now as you can see, these look dramatically different. So basically all the way through here is being shown by Syriac maps. More importantly on this though, just to the south of Kharkiv, these defensive lines coming under control, and also from Dalnay, which is this red dot, movement out beyond this road and along the front of these defensive works. I think at some point we'll see an east to west push through these defensive works. So it's very interesting to see how quickly that this incredibly important area is coming under control. Now we move just south of here and we can see further Russian gains to the north. There are some pages reporting that there is a large Ukrainian withdrawal out of this salient currently. Again, take that with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this at all. So while we're on this front, we'll just push slightly north of Kharkiv, and we have then Zoroya here. Now, Noel Reports has a very interesting update around then Sontinivskaya and Zoroya. So he's showing that Sontinivskaya, like Syriac, is under Russian control, or at least some of it, but he's saying that Zoroya is under control as well. So no other reports. He is saying that the front line looks something more like this in here, well outside of even the grey zone on this front. So again, it's funny to see where even the Ukrainian maps are showing dramatically different. But just to the north of here further, we can see where there are Russian gains in 4 different axes. Of course, what these axes are is just below Pokrovsk, and I believe they'll try and be more of a western push before there is a further push on Pokrovsk. But I do want to show you how some people are seeing this differently. And what I want to show you here is AMK mapping and talking about where he sees things moving as Russia will take chunks and move up their way using the train line as a way to get into Pokrovsk. Now, you may have heard me talk about train lines before. Selyadov, we spoke about when Russians were moving between Tskerne and Selyadov, moving to the west, that Ukraine couldn't let Russia get to the train line. Once they did, which we did see Selyadov fall very quickly. So he's sort of basing on some of this too. So let's see what he actually says. My prediction for the southern flank of Pokrovsk, I believe the Russians will utilize a railway line again and nearby chain of settlements to seize the town of Shevchenko. So in here, this will be useful for them as a strengthen the southern flank of Pokrovsk and then be used as a forward troop deployment point. It will additionally allow Russia to get behind the strong Ukrainian positions in Lysivka and Suky, which have been trying to take for a long time. It will also cut the main supply roads into Pokrovsk and put them close to other highways. So Shevchenko in here, cut off some of these areas. Suky, Lysivka will create more of a problem as well. It's sort of like envelopment before actually then an assault. This is all because Selyadov was captured. Of course, Selyadov, we spoke in here, fell very quickly. As I and others previously mentioned, the fall of Selyadov would be a major defeat for Ukraine, as the lack of defences to the west of the city means Russia can move with much more ease. We spoke about how important Selyadov was, and as well, concerningly, how much of a good position it is actually in to defend as well, like for fortifications here, and it fell very quickly, which was a huge surprise. The lack of defensive fortifications, which also makes it more difficult for Ukraine to stage flanking counterattacks, meaning that longer and what would usually be more risky spearheads can now be safely created by Russia. So if you can cut off logistical supply, you can get around, then you can actually spearhead in maybe what we're seeing in Kursk just to the south of here. But Selyadov, I know you're being told it's strategically not important. Same Vuhledar was not, but since we've seen these fall, we've seen dramatic shifts on the maps in multiple directions. So let's come back down into the south here and talk about a few other things. So we're seeing further push to the north, just straight out here, as well as in Rozdolny as well, movement by the Russian forces in here, and grey zone almost up to this road leading into Velikia Novosilivka, as well on the western side near Rivnepil, more Russian advances too. This is a very concerning area for the fortifications in here and where things may fall very quickly. So let's have a quick look at the Syriac maps. Now this tells a very different story. Rozdolny, I actually think Deep State shows more, but Syriac is showing, and other maps are showing, there is a break-in into Velikia Novosilivka. We can see where these roads run out in here, right into these directions. Russian army took control over the eastern trench systems and entered the towns from this axis. In addition, Russian forces captured half of Rozdolny. This looks more than half to me, but this Deep State is a newer map than Syriac just for the upload times. So again, this is a very, very dangerous area, and I think we may see a large withdrawal out of here that will turn back those 2023 gains also. Let's further then look at this. So this is being used in Velikia Novosilivka. Now, I've seen both Ukraine and Russia using a lot of more wheeled robot drones like this, and this is what Russians are calling the mole. So this goes into this then area and creates a massive explosion near Velikia Novosilivka. We can see where the defensive lines are sitting. And we're seeing both Ukraine and Russia successfully use a lot of those like wheeled drones to get into areas around using an actual drone, like a flying drone. Remember, these could carry significantly more weight. Now, while we're down in the south, let's just move around to Robotny and this Lehivsky as well. So let's have a look in here. Said to have been some change here. We look on this front, and what we're looking for is this Bilohira here. Oops, sorry, I zoomed out. I was meant to zoom on the other one. So this area right here, Bilohira, and then we zoom out the western outskirts of Lizki and reach the first houses of here. So Russian forces apparently made an advancement just in this direction. Again, this whole area down here is ignored, but we will wait and see if anything then changes. So you can see we're moving past this area, move up into Toretsk. No change shown on this map, but this is what I wanted to show you. This is from a Russian drone, just showing the amount of destruction in Toretsk. But you can also see where these high points that could be used for surveillance equipment and high angle of attack weapon systems as well, and how important these areas are. This is looking right around in this area, and you can see where my cursor is now. These are the high points, which by this map are shown under Ukrainian control at this point, although we do have other ones back that are in Russian control. So you can see how heavily bombarded that city is getting. Now we move up just a little bit, and then we have Chasiv Yar, an area that you're familiar with, showing just more grey zone control here by then the Russian forces, but still not looking at any of the geolocations around Klishkivka and Rivkia. We move our way up further, and we get then to Pishani front, showing that the Russians have expanded this then area as well, cutting off the Oskil. This is a month ago, but also expanding this control out to the north and south. Then we come to Kupiansk. Now I missed this yesterday, but it actually shows the removement of the grey zone in here. Of course, we saw a week or more back that Russian attack into Kupiansk. Now, it was said that it was repulsed on the day. That definitely wasn't true, because we did see that grey zone remain, but we have then seen today many pages saying the Russians were pushed out of this area. Ukrainian army expelled Russian army from the northeastern part of the Kupiansk following arrival of reinforcements. So pushing in there again, but this is attritional war. This is what Russia can do, being the more numerically sized forces. They push in there, they push in Robotny, they push in Pokrovsk, wherever, and it's going to keep the smaller force sort of on their toes, running around trying to stabilize areas. And reinforcements arrived here to push the Russians out. That means those reinforcements weren't somewhere else. This is a huge problem. This is why Kursk, which we'll talk about now, never ever made sense to me to open up a large area of front line for the Ukrainian forces being in the position that they are in. Now, there's no changes shown on this map today. It's going to just take me 1 second to find exactly where we are talking about. Russian army captured a series of positions in this area. So the best way to line up these, because the labeling on this in Kursk really sucks, is you just line up where the roads are. Now, it's right in like this grey zone area in here is where I believe that it's saying where the Russian forces gained back some territory from where Ukraine has moved back into Russia. Now, that is our maps done, but this is what I wanted to talk about, the kinetic energy of the Oreshnik. And the more research I do into this, the more I'm convinced that this is a kinetic weapon that is capable potentially of carrying nuclear weapons, but not exclusively. And we did hear Putin say that this is a non-nuclear experimental weapon. And this is what someone has said to me just on the group, and then this has started my digging down this path. Willie, I'm thinking about the marketing worth of a single Oreshnik rocket. If it really does cost 40 million euros per launch, you do the maths of how much of a PR cost this would actually be. Of course, it went on every news site around the world instantly. The whole world went into a frenzy after that. And I thought, yeah, okay, I want to have a look sort of at this. And he is not incorrect at all. I went and spoke to a few people over the past couple of days who aren't interested in war whatsoever. They're not in the military, they're just random friends of mine. And I asked them about, what do you think of this event? And one of them said back to me, well, that's the scariest thing I've ever seen. But what they were they'd seen it, they'd seen the footage, and they had really been like, oh, look, this is a bit of a scary thing. And this is very similar to how I guess it captured Mr. Joe Rogan, which of course led to his opinion being criticised very far and wide. But people that may not be looking at this day to day and may not be listening to half-hour videos, 40-minute videos of the nuances of specific, they've all seen that. They didn't see the ATACMS strikes. That wasn't shown. They saw that. It went viral everywhere. So the PR victory of everyone seeing that in the media, he's right. That's way more than the $40 million or euros that the weapon system cost. And can it affect decisions? Well, I think it's affecting how a lot of just random people who have nothing to do with war are actually seeing this as a whole. So I want to talk about the kinetic energy of this, and this is from RAND. Now, the destructive power from high-speed hypersonic weapons can deliver nuclear or conventional warheads. However, another attribute commonly known for HCMs and HEVs, so hypersonic cruise and glide vehicles, is the potential to use solely kinetic energy to destroy or damage an unhardened target. This was the whole idea behind systems like even sabos that tanks fire, or down to the rods of God. This is made possible by a combination of their high speed, kinetic energy, and their accuracy. This gives the effective explosive TNT equivalents of high-speed mass, such as a conventional strike vehicle with no onboard explosives, which today, I think it was Reuters reporting, all those weapons had no onboard explosives, this, that, and the rest. And like, well, it doesn't really need it. Now, this graph assumes energy directed and focused along a projectile direction and frontal area. Now, some will say in this, oh, the maths is wrong. No, it's not wrong. Where the maths is people looking at explosive impact, path of least resistance, versus kinetic impact here on direction and focused of the projectile going in one way. Their penetration capability depends on a combination of speed, weight, shape, and material hardness. So it's hard to get an exact idea because we don't know, but you can see where the different masses and their speed have a far more equivalence of TNT for their size and how quickly they hit something. So let's continue moving on this. Now, this is from Eternal Physics. Massive possible destruction power of the Russian submunition at impact point. Assuming the submunition is 75 kilograms with a cross-sectional radius of 7 centimeters. Remember, these are assumed figures. It would have an equivalent or effective TNT of 5.5 tons. Remember, this is in direction. We're talking as a rod, not as just an explosive, effective TNT. But if we talk higher, Mark 9, Mark 10, you can see how this would change the amount of TNT that is the equivalent or effective here. Now, if you assume the submunition is 30 kilograms and a cross-section of 7 centimeters, you're at then 2.2 tons. If you then reduce the cross-section, you can see you're at then 3 tons. So you can see where there might be some testing, adjusting if this is a kinetic weapon that has worked like this. Now, in Dnipro, the damage does not seem very severe in this case. I've located the place and its entrance to the factory. No catastrophic can be seen in satellites. You can just see these holes in the earth here. Remember, we've got no really good photos actually of this yet. And this is what Eternal Physics says. No catastrophic damage can be seen. No catastrophic damage was expected to be seen. Kinetic impact won't cause extensive surface damage as an explosive impact. This is the effective and equivalent then strike. And this got me thinking, well, this is exactly like a sabot. This is a sabot round that hits a tank. Now, this doesn't look that impressive, but that sabot has just pushed through and through the tank of like a tungsten rod. So again, yeah, you may not see that much surface impact for one of these systems, but it could be catastrophic beneath this. And this is what we need to look at. He says rare footage of a Russian Samart multiple conventional RVs impacting at the test range. We see 3 RVs. So remember, re-entry vehicles. These are MIRV, multiple independent re-entry vehicles, but this is just 3, fully engulfed in plasma and the aftermath of the impact. Now, that engulfing of plasma, the pressure put on the front of that re-entry vehicle, that apparently is one of the biggest reasons why air defense can't work against this is that plasma can just basically melt away some of that air defense because it's not going to have the same material and protections as the one coming back in. But again, that's only what I have heard and read. A huge crater showing explosive force of about 2 or 3 tons of TNT. Such a payload can be carried ad unitary. So we see from this footage, of course, it's not of that new Oreshnik, but what we can see here is these engulfed in plasma, quote, of then the Samart re-entry vehicles. But the part I'm interested in here is when they go out to this testing site, landing in this chopper, and we see them measuring it, and this dude down in here, let's say that's approximately 3 overhead maybe. So we're talking a minimum of, let's say he's 6 feet for the sake of Tinder, a minimum of, say, an 18-foot hole. But people have pointed out, well, this isn't that big of a hole. But the few things we need to look at in this is, well, firstly, that penetrator like this can really push in, but of course this is hardened steel. Samart as well doesn't, or it's hitting hardened steel, not earth. Samart 2 doesn't have then a tungsten penetrator like something like this, or like the Oreshnik could have if it is actually a kinetic weapon system. So yeah, that crater we see, there could be something down that's actually just backfilled on itself. And I believe this is what they talk about. The crater's far cry from the 100 to 200 meters deep, some people are claiming. And this person says there is a crater immediately after the impact, which is usually caves in on itself. So hard to tell the initial impact crater size if it is a deep penetrator. So unlike that steel, it may actually collapse back in on itself. So the more I look at this, the more I think it could be a kinetic style weapon that has the byproduct of sending a message, which it has done. The message of this reaching Rogan reaching every news source in the world is far, far greater than that 40 million that it cost. Now, let's look on the same RAND breakdown of hypersonics, how you can defend against these, or is it possible to defend against these? As of course, this has been one of the big talking points. Zelensky has said that there are systems in the world that can counter this. Now, as mentioned previously, speed complements hypersonic missiles' maneuverability to significantly increase effectiveness. Defenders with capable terrestrial and space sensors will have only a few minutes to know these missiles are inbound, and less adversaries will likely not have any significant warning. So short timeline. This likely means that new space or terrestrial-based air defense systems, such as boost intercept or highly capable mid-course intercept systems, would be required. These types of systems do not currently exist and would require significant investments to develop and deploy. Advanced terminal or point defences could provide some effectiveness against these high-speed manoeuvrable missiles. However, such point defences would likely only be deployed to protect high-value facilities or weapon systems. Protecting all potential targets, including civilian facilities, would be cost prohibitive. So you can't have air defence absolutely everywhere of these super, super high-end. It's going to have to. Ukraine already has a very limited amount of air defence, and I believe nothing that could intercept these. Furthermore, if there's anything the world could intercept something hypersonic, especially coming out of the atmosphere. Even if a target is equipped with advanced point defences such that it is able to defend against a HCM or HGV, so glide or cruise, it may still be vulnerable to salvos of such weapons, especially if these simultaneous attacks use manoeuvrable vehicles capable of controlling and timing the direction of the attacks. So you can either hit it mid-flight and you're going to hit one, but if they break up into those multiple re-entry vehicles, Ukraine's going to need 36 interceptors successfully minimum to hit that. So this is what they're getting at. Even if you can, it's going to be very, very difficult if there's salvos, especially if it's then 72 beyond. Defenders may work to develop directed energy defences such as lasers. But they do say that there are some challenges here with the lasers, especially by clouds or atmospheric disturbances, and the need to hit and destroy fast-moving vehicles that are equipped with thermal protection systems. This is not something that I've thought of. So they go, yeah, while the laser beam hits at the speed of light, rendering instantaneous, well, basically instantaneous flight, the beam must dwell continuously and for a significant length of time on a spot on the target to destroy it. So you're like heating that up. The hypersonic weapon's thermal protection system may inherently harden the missile against laser weapons, as the requirement for a laser spot to dwell may be relatively long to burn through or sufficiently degrade the thermal protection system, potentially several tens of seconds or longer. So even if you've got one of these like super bloody spacey space lasers, it may have to stay on that to burn it out significantly longer than another system. Why is this? Well, again, these hypersonics are going to be shielded on the front of them by things like plasma coming in. Now, of course, that light from a laser can hit it, but there's going to be way more shielding on the front of one of those Oreshnik re-entries just to survive coming back through the atmosphere like this at that speed, and the air resistance heating that up. Look at SR-71, the biggest problem was heat on what are they called, on leading edges, that the laser will be much slower if it can actually take these out. You're going to need multiple of them. And if it's going to take 10 seconds per one, well, you're going to need a lot more lasers to hit than 36 of these in the air, all coming down at one point. Altitude will also contribute to these missiles' effectiveness, at least in the near term. The crews will likely be capable of flying at altitudes between 20 and 30 kilometres. The HGVs will fly at altitudes between 40 and 100 kilometres, while the HCM's flight altitudes may be within the upper end of operating envelope of today's most capable surface-to-air missiles. So the HCMs at 20 or 30 Ks may be in the envelope of the most advanced systems of hitting that while it's then cruising. The combination of altitude, manoeuvrability, and speed would greatly limit the effectiveness of the HGVs, so of course then the glides, which will fly above the maximum effective altitude of most surface-to-air missiles, but very likely below the altitude where exo-atmospheric defences are designed to intercept inbound RVs. So then those vehicles coming in. So this is the problem, is some of these work right at the upper end of that system coming in, but maybe below anything that is then exo-atmospheric. This is going to be a very large problem. The more and more I read, I think, one, send a message. 2, what did it strike in Dnipro? And if that dirt doesn't look impressive, again, if it was built as a kinetic weapon, I wouldn't like a sabot hitting a tank. Like I've said, a sabot hitting a tank leaves a small hole. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if it is a kinetic weapon that is impossible to intercept, I believe, at this point. I believe at this point, would it be impossible to intercept for maybe America? I don't know, but Ukraine at this point, I believe, is definitely impossible to intercept. We saw none of those intercepted. Will we see another strike? Well, I don't know. So let's look at the ruble, as the ruble is consistently falling. So over the last couple of days, we have seen the ruble have a bit of a downturn to the period of 1.5%. Now, many people saying this is a complete collapse. I've seen other people saying if it was 10% in a week, that is what we would really consider a collapse. So both ways, and this is saying it's collapsing, it's not. There's people saying the front line's collapsing, people saying it's not too. My knowledge is significantly more around military than economics, but it's worth showing, as many people are saying this is going to be the downfall of Russia and that this is going to give out before the Ukrainian front line gives out. Therefore, Ukraine is going to have a victory due to this. But one of the things I think that is worth looking at is if we actually zoom out on this. So we can see from the 18th of December 21, so pre then the 22 invasion, till today, we see about a 30% decrease in the value of the ruble. Now, one thing I should mention in both of this is if you have an increase in cash supply and demand, you can lower the price of your currency against another currency. And one of the things we can see is there is increased cash flow in Russia from some of the oil and gas being traded lower cost, as well as the limiting of that oil and gas supplying demand somewhere can increase, or the supply there, demand is going to remain similar or grow, can increase cash reserves, which will have an effect here as well. It's far more difficult than just looking on a graph, and I'm really not qualified to do much more than show you and give you the basics of this. I just think it would be fair too to then look at as well the euro compared to this. So we see 30% over the last couple of years, best of 3 years, but then we see the euro has dropped just over 7% as well over the same, very similar time period. War is very expensive, it's very demanding, and of course, like Russia has lost a major players of importing its oil and gas to a degree. There's still a lot being moved across, but also the European countries trading the euro, they've also lost the ability to access that cheap stuff as well. War is expensive, war is messy. Legends, have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.